Live from the Wet Tissue Studios, somewhere in the ether, this is the 2029 presidential debate with your moderator, Liam McJizzerface. Mr. President, Prime Minister, Chancellor, today, the news network CCC released video footage of you and CEO of Greed Incorporated, billionaire, having relations with a life-size doll of Narumi Mimose from Watakoi, Love is Hard for Otaku. Now, considering that Greed Inc. has just been awarded with a $20 trillion, quadrillion, bazillion dollar government contract for mass Mimose doll production, corruption red flags have been raised. What are your comments on this? Well, first of all, Mr. Moderator, I'd just like to say this. Thank God for slice of life anime. And second of all, I am sick and tired of the establishment with their clear anti-anime agenda attempting to smear my good name alongside the millions of otakus around the world who just want to live their life and enjoy their anime. And to the evil forces of the establishment, I'm speaking to you right now. I'd just like you to know that just like Luffy during the Impel Down arc, I will not be defeated. Thank you very much. That's not what I asked you. For humanity! Is that Attack on Titan? Freedom! That's not even anime. Democracy, one of the greatest inventions of man. Unironically, that is, because sometimes I genuinely don't think that people quite realize just how amazing it is that people, even the most weak and vulnerable amongst us, still have an equal say in who governs them as anybody else. Something that seems to be such a clear example of a uniquely human ability to override the supposed laws of nature that usually equate to might is right, essentially. I mean, how many YouTube videos have you watched about the intricacies of chimpanzee politics? Exactly. But regardless of all this, one thing that never ceases to blow my mind about almost all democracies is just how crappy they are. Where despite the vast plurality of worldviews that exist in all of society, most democracies still tend to churn out truly terrible politicians in elections that sometimes only offer two real choices. You know, two meaning the closest number to one, just to be clear, which is the amount of realistic winners in Russia, for example. Hello and welcome to the I Am Not a Russia Shield show. I am your host, Sergei Vladimir Petroshka Librovsky, here to say that the comparison of a liberal democracy to the Russian political system is not meant to equate the two systems, or for that matter, meant to serve as a subtle justification for the war in Ukraine. Oh, did I say war? I meant special military operation. Oh, did I say Western liberal democracies? I meant colonialists. Oh, did I say Russian political system? I meant utopia. But why? How is it that despite us literally electing our leader, said electees are so Well, my name is Sean. This is Into the... Take two. Well, my name is Sean. This isn't... Take three. Well, my name is Sean. This isn't... Just do the intro. BS. This is my grandpa. In addition to always giving me chocolate when I went over to his place, despite my parents not allowing me to eat chocolate, he was also a damn good farmer who always harvested the best fruit. My favorite, of course, being grapes, which are arguably better than... Huh? What was that? Oh, okay. I'm being told that this actually isn't my grandpa. Sorry, old people, they all look the same. This is Harry Frankfurt, an American philosopher whose seminal essay on BS. Side note here that I'm gonna be using the term BS because of YouTube censorship. I'm just gonna assume you know what I'm talking about. So moving on, will form the basis of this video, where in it, Frankfurt attempts to formulate a categorical definition for, well, BS, ultimately defining it as something along these lines. Deceptive misrepresentation, short of lying, which is indifferent to facts. So this is going to be important soon, so make sure to remember it. Don't worry, I'll remind you later if you forgot. But first, some statistics. Yay! So, according to recent polls, trust in politicians amongst the general public is currently as low as 10%, with their marks trailing to the likes of ad executives, estate agents, and even journalists. And whilst these numbers are pretty tragic in and of themselves, when compared with voting data, it plainly highlights a pretty shocking fact that although a vast majority of voters literally do not trust politicians' honesty, they nonetheless vote for them regardless. Which essentially renders us with the pretty inescapable conclusion that within politics, honesty is not the primary determinant of success, which has in turn led many to label this era of politics as post-truth politics, where public debate is no longer based on factual truths, but instead something else. But what is this something else? Well, I hope you remember your Frankfurtian definitions, children. You do remember the definitions, right? Here it is if you forgot. So, a key point of Frankfurt's definition of BS is the distinction that he draws between the BSer and the liar, in that whilst the two do share some common traits of deceptiveness, for example, the liar, unlike the BSer, is not indifferent to facts, as lying by its very nature implies a care, understanding, and by definition, limitation of the truth, albeit with the purpose of misrepresenting it. And by the flip side of the coin, it also means that the BSer is not a liar per se, but instead completely neutral to the distinction between fact and fiction, often for the sake of his or her own benefit, of course. So as an example, let us take an obviously true statement, such as, the guy on camera right now is really handsome and charismatic. Now, the reason why this is true is because if you just look at me and see that is what it says on the green screen, right? Yeah? Okay. Because it's important. You do remember. Yeah. Okay. So the reason why this is true is because if you just... Why do I get the feeling that it says something else? I don't know. I mean, I'm just kind of hoping that this isn't just some I'm gonna be the butt of the joke sort of thing. No? Okay. So the reason why this is obviously true is because, you know what, let's just use a different example. So as an example, let us take an obviously true statement like, this apple is red. Well, in this case, the liar necessarily has to see the apple, recognize that it is in fact red, and then falsely claim that it's green, for example. But the BSer? Well, the BSer doesn't even need to look at the apple and verify the statement to begin with, because the facts simply do not matter to them. So they may argue that it's green, or blue, or yellow, or even correctly that it's red. But even if they do argue it to be red, the BSer is nonetheless every bit as deceptive as the liar. since they're nonetheless falsely portraying their intent within the argument, not as seekers of truth, but instead of advancing their own interests. What the hell is this? I clicked on this video for my dose of political drama, not this philosophy mumbo jumbo. Swipe. Frankfurt, 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 Frankfurt. Frankfurt, 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 yo, Frankfurt, yo, Frankfurt, Frankfurt, Frankfurt. What the hell? Frank? Furt. You know what? I don't need to watch videos to have fun. I'll just meditate instead. Frankfurt. 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 You know what? Just relax. Just relax. It's all in your mind. It's all in your mind, okay? Meditate. Meditate. Frankfurt, 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 Frankfurt. That's right, kids. There's no getting rid of me. You will be educated on the philosophy of politics, and you will be educated now. Now let's talk about Hegel. That's a joke. I literally know nothing about Hegel. Have you read any of his stuff? It's so complicated. So let's now talk about how this is relevant for this video, and how the definition of BSer perfectly explains why politicians are consistently elected into such important positions despite being so mistrusted by the general public. Part 2. Lying is really dumb. No BS. This is George Santos, a US former congressman who upon his election into the New York congressional district seemed to be something of a rising star in US politics, in large part due to his fascinating story as a Ukrainian refugee of Jewish descent who wrote a rags to riches story from the bottom to acceptance within a prestigious university, where he became a volleyball champion and after graduating at the top of his class, immediately finding prestigious jobs with the likes of Citigroup and Goldman Sachs. Which in turn begs the question, how is it possible that a man with this sort of profile is not at the forefront of US politics? And the answer to that is that it's actually not possible, because Santos actually lied about all this stuff, eventually leading to his complete expulsion from the wider US political system, with any return seemingly shot down immediately at its inception. But again, if people already do not trust politicians, why would Santos being caught with his hand in the proverbial cookie jar have any sort of negative effects on him? Well, one may argue that Santos's problem was not his lies per se, as much as his getting caught for them. But you only really need to look at one fact-checking website to realize that Santos is definitely not unique in this regard. So what gives? Why was Santos's demise so quick and so devastating in contrast to others? And the answer to that question? Because Santos had actually forgotten about the golden rule. Never tell a lie when you can just BS your way through. Hallelujah! Because as we already established, lies, they're falsifiable, vulnerable to the evil clutches of truth and reality. But BS? Well, BS exists in a realm of its own. So if the BSer were to be aiding Santos, they would advise him to say not, "I worked at Goldman Sachs," but instead something like, "I'm better than any Goldman Sachs expert that I ever met." What does this mean exactly? Well, the statement definitely implies his own intellectual prowess, which he deems to be greater than a Goldman Sachs expert, which society generally deems to be pretty intelligent. But how can one even start to go about proving whether this statement is true or false? I mean, by virtue of the latter part of the statement, it does seem to imply that he met many Goldman Sachs experts, thus possibly implying that he may have been one himself at some point. But since he doesn't explicitly say so, a background check finding that he never did would do little to harm him. And the first part is equally as unverifiable. I mean, better at what? economics, stock portfolios, asset management, League of Legends. I mean, it's all just about vague enough to misrepresent reality in a manner beneficial to him, but separated enough from the truth that he can't really be checked on it. And that, ladies and gentlemen, is the perfect recipe for well-brisked and gourmet BS. But hold on just a second, because this still doesn't explain why we elect untrustworthy politicians. I mean, sure, it shows how the BSer is more likely to be successful than the liar in the long term, but how does it prove why people tend to prefer electing BSers than honest politicians, which, believe it or not, do exist, and who similarly to BSers are completely unburdened by the verification process, except due to their honesty rather than their malice? Well, calm down just a minute there, Buster, because that's what we're getting onto now with Part 3, Frames. And Sean from Into the Ether gets the ball, and oh, that is some brilliant play. That is amazing. He's so talented. Way better than LeBron, I'd say. Also, super good looking. I mean, so attractive. And oh, that is a great move, that is a great move, and Into the Ether are only 2 points behind with only a second left on the buzzer, and he's in the perfect three-point position, and he loses the ball, but he's saying that he has been fouled, and Michael Schmorden is denying it, he's absolutely denying it, and oh my, the ref has a massive decision to make. Don't worry, guys. I got this. I got everything under control. This is what they pay me for. Don't worry. I'm gonna solve this. Okay, seriously, guys. I wasn't really paying attention there. I'm really hoping one of you saw something. I gotta be honest. I don't really know. I wasn't really paying that much attention. Yeah, I wasn't really paying attention either, if I'm being honest. Please tell me you saw something. I gotta be honest. Here, my wife, she went to Victoria's Secrets today, so I'm a little distracted. I mean, I heard on DSPN that Schmorden's a dirty player. He must have fouled Sean. I say it's a foul. Wait a second, that's not what I heard. According to FSPN, Sean's a showboater. He must have lost the ball and then pretended to be fouled. No foul, I say. That's a head scratcher. What do you think? How about you? I don't know. Foul? Foul! And Sean wins the championship for Into the Ether, and how can you not subscribe now? Seriously, subscribe now.
And the Oscar goes to...
Sean from Into the Ether.
Whoa, thank you. I don't know what to say. I'm speechless about this. Although it's clearly well deserved. It was such a great movie. It was amazing. Like, I'm so talented. I mean, I won an Oscar way younger than Leo ever did. Just saying. Though I'm probably too old for him, am I right? I guess I'll just have to settle for someone else. Jada, I see you. What?
Keep my wife's name out your mouth!
Okay. I'm sorry, Will. I'm sorry. Please don't hit me. Probably should just get to my speech right now. So, everybody in this audience is obviously very smart and sophisticated, and so I probably don't need to explain to you the subtle undertones of my magnum opus. But for all the normal people who are probably watching us better people right now, I feel like I need to explain the premise of my movie a little more on your level. And I feel like I'm a little too well-dressed to do so. So not famous Sean, take it away. So the concept of the frame was originally conceived of in the area of psychology to explain a specific type of cognitive bias where individuals tend to make choices dependent not upon the facts of the matter, but instead the manner in which they're presented. I.e. that the foul is called based not upon an analysis of footage, but instead upon whether one player is deemed a cheater or alternatively another deemed aggressive. And much like how the idea of BS is borrowed into political science, so is the notion of frames, which pretty accurately explains how politics is usually conducted. We're within the smelly armpit of the arena, simply stating facts is often simply not going to suffice if not cloaked in some sort of frame. I mean, people have cognitive biases, cultural prejudices, personal preferences, irrational beliefs, and more. And any factual truth that isn't congruent to the frame that these things create is likely to just be shunned away by the voter. And malicious politicians are, in turn, more than willing to take advantage of this, whilst not so malicious ones are forced to do so. And whilst frames can shift over time, sometimes even through rationality and empirical evidence, this is not necessarily the case. In an article authored by Hopkin and Rosamond, for example, voting patterns after the 2008 financial crisis were investigated, where the authors noted that amid some of the most turbulent economic periods in history, voters rightfully prioritize economic policy over anything else. But that they also often tended to buy into very simplistic narratives on economic policy, which framed the issue as a matter of tightening the belt on state expenditure and on deficit reduction, despite a large amount of evidence highlighting how a possible increase in state expenditure can help to ease the burden. Controversy allergic Sean here to say that I'm not an economist and therefore not claiming one economic policy to be superior to another. What I'm trying to highlight here is that the reason why most people favored lowering state spending was because it offered a more logical manner for understanding a complex issue with many variables. And I'm not trying to insinuate here that the common voter is an idiot or anything like that, just to emphasize that they're obviously not as well versed in it as economists who have literally dedicated their whole lives to it. And what was interesting about this period is that political parties who were traditionally opposed to this style of economic policy not only lost elections, but themselves switched their economic policy to be more in line with this new frame.
We will set out tough fiscal rules to balance the current budget and to get the national debt on a downward path.
Now again, whether this is a good thing or a bad thing is irrelevant for this video, because what is relevant is that because of the frame in question, that high fiscal expenditure is bad for economic recovery, politicians traditionally opposed to this notion nonetheless paid heed to it due to its political benefit. Or in other words, politicians became indifferent to the truth in favor of deceptively framing their beliefs in a specific way, i.e. BSing. See what I did there? It's based on the whole video. It's kind of a call. Okay, I'll continue. And this in a nutshell is why voters are for the most part fine with voting for politicians that they do not trust, as long as they verify their cognitively biased frames. Still don't believe me? Just listen to this.
In Springfield, they're eating the dogs, the people that came in. They're eating the cats. They're eating the pets of the people that live there.
Oh no! Oh no, please don't mention Trump. Please don't. Now, this statement is, in essence, the ideal case study for everything that we've been talking about. And the reason for this is because even though the claim is seemingly completely false, its truth was nonetheless completely redundant, since it was not meant to determine an on-the-ground fact, but instead to pump a specific frame, of democratic border policy to be harmful to the US, and how a Trumpian alternative would be so much safer. Or as his own running mate J.D. Vance put it,
if I have to create stories so that the American media actually pays attention to the suffering of the American people, then that's what I'm going to do, Dana, because you guys are completely letting Kamala Harris coast.
So let us now take a look at a less obvious example of this. And for the sake of bipartisanship, let us move to the other side of the aisle. Oh, thank God. Oh, thank God.
Everybody has a responsibility to contribute. For me, it was serving in the Army National Guard. I joined up 2 days after my 17th birthday, and I proudly wore our nation's uniform for 24 years.
Now, it's worth noting here that lots of controversy erupted regarding whether Waltz was being honest or not regarding the nature of his military service. And I'm not here to affirm or deny the truthfulness of any position, but instead to claim that its legitimacy or illegitimacy just doesn't matter to begin with. Because Waltz's intention is not necessarily to convince people about the specific nature of his military service, but instead to frame himself as a patriot willing to fight and die for US ideals of freedom and liberty. And now, for the most powerful example of them all, how about we go back to March 2003, one of the most seminal events of our time, when President George W. Bush declared his intention to invade Iraq, amidst rumors, later proven to be untrue, regarding their possession of WMDs. Now, I recommend you watch the whole video at the link provided to notice just how little he even mentions WMDs at all, instead framing the invasion as a noble endeavor meant to protect the world from tyrants and free it from dictators.
American and coalition forces are in the early stages of military operations to disarm Iraq, to free its people, and to defend the world from grave danger. To all the men and women of the United States Armed Forces now in the Middle East, the peace of a troubled world and the hopes of an oppressed people now depend on you. America faces an enemy who has no regard for conventions of war or rules of morality. The people of the United States and our friends and allies will not live at the mercy of an outlaw regime. We will pass through this time of peril and carry on the work of peace. We will defend our freedom. We will bring freedom to others, and we will prevail. May God bless our country and all who defend her.
Part 4. Conclusion. So, yeah, that's it pretty much. Can we just end the video now? A conclusion constitutes a final judgment or decision that logically follows from the body of the previous work, in turn succinctly tying a metaphorical bow on the work in question. So why do we elect such terrible leaders? Well, essentially, because we have no choice. The common voter is essentially expected to make educated decisions on complex socio-economic systems that even the select few experts who dedicate their entire lives to understanding them still for the most part fail to do so. Which means that it's more than understandable that the common voter, who's simply too busy living an increasingly difficult life, has no choice but to rest on these cognitive biases. Meaning that politicians, or at least the ones that care about winning, are more than happy to take advantage of this, BSing to the people's delight. And coming off as insincere, sure, but victoriously insincere nonetheless. So again, what are we to do about this? That's not what the title of this video is. When did I promise solutions? Well, honestly, I don't really know. Hopkin and Rossmond in the aforementioned article seem to imply that this relatively recent phenomenon is primarily attributable to the collapse of party loyalty, which further incentivizes these sorts of tactics from politicians, and even implying that this may have been a bad thing, perhaps. But is sheepishly following parties really the solution here? I mean, education may be another alternative, but again, unless a person can dedicate a very large amount of mental resources on political analysis, which isn't really a realistic expectation, this doesn't really do much either. So maybe what this should ultimately come down to is, well, having higher expectations of politicians. So although people voting for politicians they don't trust is pretty shocking, it does on the bright side highlight at least the ability to recognize insincerity. So maybe the answer to this problem is just to not vote for someone if you don't deem them to be sincere. I mean, like I said, at the end of the day, the choice of who to vote for is still in the voter's hand, so maybe demanding honesty above anything else is the way to go here. I mean, sure, voting for people based on sincerity rather than policy is often subject to widespread ridicule, but in light of our current system, this may ultimately prove to be the solution to the BS problem in our political system. And who knows, maybe the damn thing will ultimately save this wonderful thing that we call democracy. Wait a second, isn't that in itself an attempt to frame a new paradigm? You BSer. People, I can't really recommend doing your own research enough and finding your own solutions.